This video will go over how to approach visual text in the GAMSAT exam. I'll go over how to approach questions in section 1 and also cartoons and diagrams. Part of the reason why I made these videos, or that I'm putting together these videos, is that I don't think that GAMSAT tutoring or GAMSAT success should rely on you having tons of money to spend on tutoring, to spend on courses, and a lot of the courses out there are very expensive, costing thousands of dollars. So I just wanted to put out videos that would really help anyone preparing for the GAMSAT, prepare for it and not have to feel like they're held back. So in terms of the question strategy, there's a step-by-step breakdown of how to analyze the question. So first of all, you're going to read the question slowly. You're going to assess the questions on an explicit and implicit basis. So whether the information that they're asking us to find is explicitly stated in the text, or whether it's implied. Then you're going to have to determine whether it's specific or general. So is it a very specific part of the text I have to look at, or a specific part that I need to consider, or is it more general? Should I be looking at the whole text, the text as a whole? And then I'm going to use that to determine where to look for the evidence and the level of directness, or to tell whether I should make an inference, and if that's necessary. So after that, I'll show you how to identify the key elements of the question and how to clearly think about what traps are associated with these elements. So these are the key elements and their traps. So you want to first start by focusing on the question. So what specific element of the text is being referenced? And is it one element or is it multiple? And the correct answer will refer to all elements brought up in the question. So for example, if they say, what is the overall message of both passages? Well, I'll be looking at the overall message. I wouldn't be looking at one very specific part of the text, whatever it may be. And another important thing you have to consider are qualifiers. So qualifiers such as most, least, best imply that multiple answer options may have evidence for them, and you need to find the one with the most evidence. So which of the following features of the cartoon contribute least to the message of the cartoon? So things like this, they suggest that there are multiple answers, and if there are multiple answers, then when we're going through the answer options, we have to consider the fact that more than one of the answer options could be correct, but we're going to be looking at what is the most correct, or what is the best answer out of all the answers that they give us. So in terms of implicitness / explicitness, terms like could, suggests, implies, tells you that the correct answer will require to be inferential in your reasoning. So if you don't know what the word inferential means, it means you have to think slightly outside of the box. So think outside of the box, or outside of the text. So for example, maybe there is some sort of maybe there's two characters, and maybe they are having an argument, and then maybe we can infer from whatever they're arguing about that something else might have happened. Maybe there was these two parents arguing with each other, and they're talking about something that's related to a child, and maybe that child passed away, or maybe something happened to that child, or maybe one of the parents hurt that child. So in some cases we have to infer in order to get the answer, whereas in other cases it's explicitly stated. But because the GAMSAT tries to be a little bit more difficult than normal exams, they will try and test your inferential skills and your ability to make conclusions from what you've been given. And straightforward answers are likely to be wrong because you have to infer it. Likewise, terms like is suggest definitiveness. So what does that mean? If I see is in a particular question, then it's probably going to be an explicit answer, and the information is probably going to be obviously shown in the text itself, rather than me having to go ahead and then try and predict what's been happening, or trying to read between the lines of what's happening. For example, something like, what does this cartoon suggest about media consumers? So the word suggest means that I should try and figure out an inferential answer, that there's some sort of implied meaning in the text. And that's just one of the areas to look at. Next, we're going to go into negatives and double negatives. So be really mindful of terms like not. So if you were looking for the answer to a question and you didn't read the not part, you're going to choose the wrong answer, because you're going to choose the answer that is true when really the question is asking you for what's false. So just a tip, remove the double negative and find which answer is incorrect. And this will be your correct answer. For example, which of the following is not the least likely main point of the author? So you're just looking for which one is not the main point of the author. And just the fifth trap, quotations. So if a quote is slash direct reference is given to you, use this as the primary source of evidence. So if they have given you a quote, they want you to be very explicit to that quote. A lot of times in the GAMSAT, you won't really it'll be obvious when something is an explicit answer or explicit question, because they'll give you the quote, you'll click on the quote, and it'll actually highlight the text that they want you to look at or look around. If it's not directly there, then look maybe one sentence before or one sentence after if it's a normal technical text. So in terms of text type and strategy, there are 6 different text types in the GAMSAT in the section 1, and they fall under 3 categories. So you have the visual text. So this is your cartoons, this is your diagrams. So cartoons are usually political cartoons. Sometimes it's advertisements, but they'll give you some sort of cartoon, or it could even be comics. Diagrams could be, well, it could be anything. There's a very broad range of things that they can give us for the diagrams. This could be like like the business life cycle, or some sort of flow chart, or some sort of Venn diagram. I will be focusing on the technical and creative text in the next 2 videos. So the next video will talk about technical text, and I'll deep dive into how to break down technical text. And then the video after that, I'll deep dive into how to break down creative text. But today we're going to be focusing mainly on the visual texts. Okay, so when we approach questions like cartoons or any sort of question in the GAMSAT, we want to use a strategy of some sort. We can't just simply rely on our own knowledge and looking at a question, looking at the questions and looking at the cartoons, and not having a logical way to organize our thoughts. So we want to make sure that we have some sort of logical approach to cartoons and other question types in the GAMSAT. The first thing I would look at for this is with the cartoon, I'm looking at the issue. So this could be the social issue that they're trying to kind of discuss in this social issue that they're trying to showcase in this particular cartoon. And the second one would be the humor. So like what makes this funny? What makes this funny? Slash like what is the satire? What is it trying to critique? Okay, and then 3 is the point. Like, why did the author, or why do we think the author made this cartoon, and what was the message that he or she wants to get across? Okay, so we're going to break down issue, humor, and point, or the main point for all of these cartoons that I have here. So the first one here, we can see that it's this cartoon. There's the Hell's Auditors, it's motorcycle group. You have the visual part of the cartoon, and then you have the caption. And most of the cartoons that you're going to deal with, they're going to have visual aspects and also caption aspects as well. And you just want to have a look at the cartoon and then try and apply our strategy. So the first strategy is, you try and find the issue here. So fortunately, this only happens once a year. How's auditors? Maybe this issue is about auditing, and if anyone knows what auditing means, it's basically it's important tax stuff. So taxes slash auditor, taxes, basically business in general. So the issue is some sort of thing about auditing or taxes or business. The humor mainly comes from the fact that they say this happens only once a year. And since they say it only happens once a year, well, I guess the humor is that, plus the fact that they are this rebel looking group of motorcycle riders, and they're trying to make them seem kind of rebellious, or kind of, I don't know, they're trying to make them seem like they disrupt people's work from the way that they're, motorcycles are generally loud, and depending on who you ask, they can be annoying to hear, especially if you're going through an office like this. So the humor is basically the humor is not the distracting, but I can't think of the right word right now, but distracting nature, the annoying nature of auditors. Slash taxes, because auditors, they are technically accountants and they deal with taxes for companies. And the main point might be that, well, looking at the caption as well, fortunately this only happens once a year. These people are coming in once a year and they're disrupting the workflow of this company. And that would essentially be the main point. We would go from, they're trying to talk about taxes or business or something to do with that. And then the humor is the fact that, they've used motorcycles as a symbol of, being distracting and being annoying, at least in this case. And the main point is that these people that come in once a year for tax purposes, they kind of disrupt everything that's happening in the workplace. And since they disrupt it, that's the issue that the author wants to get across, that this process is disruptive to everyone in the workplace. You can see that people here are distracted looking at these motorcycle riders, and people are saying that fortunately this only happens once a year, so suggesting that they don't want this to happen any more than it really should. So that's the first part. The first bit is you look at the question and then you try and that's the first bit. You look at the cartoon, you break down the visual aspects, and you break down the text-based aspects. And the second part is you have to look at the question. So according to the caption, so we can see this is explicit because we have to focus on the caption. The Hell's auditors are depicted as fortunate. So going back to the caption. Fortunately, this only happens once a year. Okay, so fortunately, this only happens once a year. They don't want this to happen any more than it has to. We'll have a go. So that's the general gist that I get from the caption. I'll go into the different the answer options now. So A, B, C, and D. So they're uninvited. Okay, so they're uninvited. So people don't really like them being around. This could be correct. I'm not going to eliminate this right away. Disorderly. Now, because it's asked me to look at the caption, I can't look at the rest of the text to answer this question, because if I look at the visual part, they are riding motorcycles in someone's office. That is disorderly, but the caption does not tell us whether they're disorderly. So I cannot select B as a correct option. So I must get rid of B. Unwanted. Okay. Unwanted. Now, just looking at the caption, fortunately, this happens once a year. Now, because it's an explicit question, I cannot say that they're unwanted because the caption itself does not suggest that they're unwanted. So the caption suggests that they're unwanted, but it's more like I have to kind of make a bit of an inference or make a bit of a jump to decide that. So I cannot fully go with this. So I'm down to temporary and uninvited. Now, the caption says that this only happens once a year. Okay, so this happens on a temporary basis. And that's why I would choose option D as the correct answer. So sometimes when it comes to the GAMSAT, especially when it comes to section 1, you'll have like, if you have 4 options like A, B, C, D, you might end up with 2 that are completely wrong off the bat, or like one that's very wrong, one that's wrong when you kind of delve into it a little bit more. But then you end up with 2 answers that are very similar to each other. And this is like a theory. I think it's called item response theory. I've read this on certain Reddit pages. And for item response theory, it suggests that, well, even if you don't get the correct answer, if you get almost the correct answer, so like for example, like if like D was the correct answer and A was the second correct answer, if you clicked on A, you wouldn't get everything wrong. Like you wouldn't get that marked as 0. You would get a partial mark. No one knows this for sure because ASA doesn't actually have, like, they're not very transparent with the way they mark, but they have to try and figure out whether you're thinking through logically and trying to like work out the question in a logical manner. And they know that if you just pick B or C, like you're not really thinking through the question. And if you pick the answer that's almost correct, well, at least you're thinking through, you're eliminating some options, or at least that's what they predict with whatever they use to predict how people think. And that's why sometimes you can get sometimes you might get ranked, you might get like marked lower in some cases, because if, for example, you guessed a whole bunch of questions, well, they'll notice that you're getting 1/4 of the questions correct for a given area, and they're going to be like, oh, this person's guessing, and then they're going to bring down your mark because they don't think you're thinking through the questions. So just know that, like, with section 1, you'll find that it's really hard to get down to an answer that's very, very clearly correct. You'll normally get down to a 50-50, and as long as you get down to that 50-50, know that you're still scoring at least part of those marks. Okay, now just moving on to the next question. Oops, wrong thing. Moving on to the next question. Let me change my color. Let's use just purple. All right. So remember, first step is the issue. So looking at this cartoon, we can see these 2 people here are talking. There's this person laying on the couch, and there's a dog here. That's Roger's therapy dog. Okay, so it's talking about therapy. The humor is that the dog is in the place of where the therapist would be. So the dog is acting like a therapist in this question. Okay, so the point, or the potential point, that the author is trying to kind of tell us is that people are maybe using animals in place of therapists, or maybe they're using animals to cope with their mental struggles. So people use their pets to cope with mental struggles. Okay, so we have the visual aspect here, and we have the text here. Right. So which of the following best depicts the joke in this cartoon? Okay, so let's kind of break down each of these. So because it's asking us, well, what best depicts the joke? Best suggests that there's probably multiple answers, or multiple correct answers, and we are trying to figure out, well, which one is the most correct out of those, and depicts the joke in this cartoon. Or I'll be looking at the humor of this cartoon. So the humor is around the fact that the dog is in the place of the therapist. So option A, people are turning to comfort animals instead of traditional therapists. Could be. B, men often find it easy to open up to their dog than their own wife. There really isn't anything to suggest that these are, this is his wife, and it's a bit too much of an extreme jump to make. is very inferential. It's a bit too inferential, and it also brings in biases. So sometimes with the GAMSAT, they'll have these trap questions where if you select this answer option, they're going to try and figure out whether you're biased against, like, I don't know, like biased against women, or whether you're sexist, or whether you're racist. And there'll be some like options to kind of like put in there where you might pick it if like you let your biases get the better of you, and you pick it out of, you know, your biases rather than actually looking at the text itself. Looking at C, the therapy dog appears overwhelmed by its responsibilities. Now, the dog doesn't really look overwhelmed. He looks puzzled, if anything, but not overwhelmed. So I would eliminate option C. For D, dogs are not just a pet anymore, but under an obligation to be man's best friend. Okay, so dogs are not just a pet anymore, but under an obligation to be man's best friend. So I would look at these two options, and I would pick between those two options. So dogs are not just a pet anymore, but under an obligation to be man's best friend. Now, the word obligation, that's not really suggested here in this text. Like, there doesn't seem like anywhere in the text, whether it's the visual part or whether it's the actual like caption, suggests that the dog has an obligation to be man's best friend or to help the man out. So I'm going to eliminate D off of that alone. For A, I guess A is also consistent with my point that I've kind of derived from my visual here, which is that people are turning to comfort animals instead of traditional therapists, because, you know, who is in the place of the therapist in this like therapist chair thing? It's the dog, right? So this is a reasonable conclusion to make. You know, judging by the rest of the question, like rest of the answer options, this is probably the best answer option out of them. So I would pick A as the answer to this. Okay, so this is also another one very similar to the previous one. So another person's laying down, and then this is the therapist, or at least the dog in the place of the therapist. The issue is still going to be therapy. The humor in this case is that, well, I think you're wonderful. So the humor is that the dog is complimenting the man sitting here. Now, the reason why this is the humor or the satire is probably because the dog is always going to be really nice to you. Like, the dog's probably not going to say anything bad about you. They're going to show you unconditional care and love. So that's why the compliment is the humor. It's the satire that dogs cannot really give in like an impartial view. They have to just give, you know, they always will love you. At least hopefully they always will love you. But yeah, so 3, the point is that, well, the point, at least as far as I think it is, points, is that dogs might not be great therapists because they can only tell you good things. Or maybe I should say it more like, so dogs always unconditionally treat you well. Treat you well, and that can make them, you know, not effective therapists, because they'll never really tell you any mistakes you're making. But this is just like me trying to figure out what the point of this might be, because of the vagueness of a lot of these texts. Sometimes it's obvious, sometimes it's not so obvious, and sometimes there can be a couple different interpretations. You just want to have some sort of structure to how you break down the text, so you have some sort of interpretation and you have something to go off of. It's not always going to be perfect, but just having something is better than nothing. So rather than just looking at the text and being like, okay, that's cool, and then answering the questions, that's a very poor strategy. Trying to have something like this where at least you like structure your thought process and in your justification, you're more likely to get the answers correct. So it says cartoon 2 is funny because we often get more comfort and happiness from our dogs than from pricey psychologists. Now, because So because we're trying to focus on what's funny. We're trying to focus on the humor. I should mainly try and focus on that aspect. And since there's nothing in the humor that suggests that psychologists are pricey, that's more of a bias. I shouldn't pick answer option A. For B, in reality, it's a dog that controls the human, not the other way around. That just doesn't really sound plausible. Like, there's nothing about the dog controlling the human here. The dog's complimenting the human while saying that, oh, well, I think you're wonderful. So I don't think that's correct. I think that might also be a question where it's trying to bring in your bias. It's trying to bring in your bias about maybe what your thoughts are on, like, receiving compliments, whether you might think it's a form of manipulation or something. But that's just me kind of being a bit extreme with my inferences. But anyways, those two are definitely wrong. For option C, if dogs were therapists, they'd be hilariously biased, always offering unconditional support no matter what. Okay, this is most likely going to be the answer, just because, like, the humor or the funniness, the funny thing is the humor, and the humor is the fact that the dog is complimenting the man. And this is most likely going to be correct, but I'll just double check D and make sure that I can eliminate D. So our relationship with dogs often reflect how we see ourselves and our own sense of self-worth. So it's how we see ourselves. Now, there isn't really anything about how we see ourselves or our sense of self-worth in this particular, like, visual text. So there is a little bit, but I don't think there's enough of it there compared to something like C, where, if dogs were therapists, they'd be hilariously biased, because offering unconditional support no matter what is more so that's what's more so happening in this text. That's what's mainly focused on the humor or the satire that they're talking about here. So I'm going to eliminate option D and I'm going to keep option C. All right, moving on to the next question. So we have this cartoon. It says "Don't shoot," and it's like the soldier is like talking to the media saying "Don't shoot," and the people there are saying "Don't shoot" as well, but they mean two different things. So the issue here is media slash police violence. And the humor is that both are saying "Don't shoot." So both the soldier, or like the police officer, and the people here. So yeah, so police violence may be against minorities, but that's, I'm not sure if I should make that jump, but definitely police violence. I'm just I don't know if there's a political correct way for me to say this, but they seem like minorities. So yeah, so 2 is the humor, both saying "Don't shoot," and the point of this is probably to say that, like, to show that police violence police violence is often covered up by perpetrators. Or that there's some sort of, like, there's an imperative to hide the injustices that's done to minorities. From the media. All right, so the main message of this cartoon is probably going to be talking about my main point, or my point, which is about police violence, slash, like, hiding injustices against, minorities from the media. So we're talking about media, there's some sort of violence happening, and there's minorities here. So there's a few different, like, issues at play. We'll have a look at the answer options. So option A, The media serve as society's watchful eye, holding power to account. Media serve as society's watchful eye. I'll come back to that answer. I can't eliminate it straight away, but I'll come back to it. So police often resist public scrutiny of their controversial actions. Okay, maybe that's correct. So I'm unsure about eliminating those two. Now to look at option C. Innocent civilians are sometimes shot by police. I feel like the main message of this goes beyond just that. So I feel like that's correct on its own, but in terms of this particular text, I feel like the answer that they want goes a bit further than that and actually incorporates more of this main theme. D, gun violence is a tragic outcome that harms everyone involved. I don't think this harms everyone involved part really shows up in this text. So I don't think the media person is harmed here, and I don't think this police officer is harmed. If anything, it's just these people here. So I'll get rid of that. So we're down to A and B, which are my 50-50s. Those were the two options that were pretty hard for me to kind of like eliminate off the bat. So I have to look at them very carefully. So the media serve as society's watchful eye, holding power to account. Now, the first part here sounds correct. The media serve as society's watchful eye. So the media is watching the people committing violence and the people, who that violence is being committed to. But are they holding the power to account? I'm not really sure about that. I'm sure about this. I'm not that sure about this. And looking at B, police often resist public scrutiny of their controversial actions. So this is a tough one. Police often resist public scrutiny. So this seems like a police officer. They're resisting public scrutiny. So I guess in the text there is a part where they are, telling the media person, don't shoot, as in like don't film this. So that could be correct of their controversial actions. I mean, obviously violence against minorities is controversial. I think that if I had to pick between A and B, I think B is more correct than A. So the main message is that the police are resisting public scrutiny of their controversial actions, rather than just being the media serving as a watchful eye, holding power to account. I feel like this is more specific to what's happening to the text, and therefore I would eliminate option A and I'd pick option B. Okay, moving on to, I think this is the last question. Yeah, this is the last question of the cartoon section before we move on to diagrams. So we'll work on this one too. So which characteristics of the cartoon critiques modern society? So let's have a closer look at the cartoon. So we have these two dogs. There's a computer. This could be related to technology. On the internet, nobody knows you're a dog. Okay, so nobody knows. That's relating to anonymity. Okay, so the issue could be, your identity online, like how you can hide your identity online. The humor is the fact that I guess this dog's having a conversation. About anonymity. And the main point of this is just maybe the author wants to highlight how you don't really know people's identities online, or how people hide identities online. So the point is that no one knows who you are on the internet. Right, so hiding identities. Okay, so the critique of modern society. So if I want to talk about modern society, maybe this is the whole technology, people on the internet, people hiding their identities on the internet, people trying to do things online and trying to, I guess, hide away from who they actually are. So for option A, it says a dog is using, so the characteristic that's critiquing the cartoon, so the dog is using the internet's anonymity to express things it couldn't in real life. So the first part of this seems correct. internet's so the dog is using the internet's anonymity, yes, but there's nothing to suggest that he's expressing things he couldn't do online, so he couldn't do in real life. He just says that, well, on the internet, nobody knows you're a dog. So I'm going to eliminate this one for now, and I'll look at the other options. So option B, the dog is unknowingly revealing its true identity by admitting it's a dog to another canine. I'll go to the next one. I don't really like that answer, but I'll just look at the next option. The idea plays off the saying, no one knows you're a dog online, by taking it to an absurd extreme. I'm also going to move on to the next question for that. The talking dog is speaking to a normal dog that has no idea what is being said. So we don't know if it's a normal dog. We know that this one talks, but we don't know if this is just normal, so I can eliminate D. And then I'm just down to these two options. So the dog is unknowingly revealing its true identity to admitting it's a dog to another canine. So the dog is unknowingly revealing its true identity by admitting it's dog to another canine. Now, for this answer option, it's very unlikely that this dog is unknowingly revealing its true identity to this other dog, because this other dog knows it's a dog. So I think it would be kind of absurd to think that, it doesn't know that it's telling the dog that it's a dog. So I would eliminate option B. So that just leaves me with C. The idea plays off the saying, no one knows you're a dog online, by taking to an absurd extreme. I think that, well, personally, I haven't heard this before, but I think if it was a saying, this is an absurd extreme to take that saying, where they've turned it into a cartoon where it's literally dogs saying how, no one really knows that we're dogs and we're using the internet and we're online. So that's how I would break down these questions. You don't have to follow just this strategy. There's other strategies out there as well, but this is personally the one that I've used for section 1, and the people I know who've scored in the top 5% or the top quartiles and deciles and percentiles for section 1 have used to break down their questions and to score highly in section 1. Moving on to diagrams now. Diagrams are slightly different to cartoons. Cartoons are more so like, they'll give you some political thing like we saw, or they'll give you some sort of cartoon that's talking about some social issue. But diagrams are more so like flowcharts or processes, and that you have to break down. There's a very broad range of diagrams. There's a lot of different things that can be used as a diagram. As I mentioned earlier, we could use Venn diagrams as diagrams. We could use flowcharts as diagrams. There might be cyclical charts. Yeah, so there's tons of different things that people, that ACER can use in terms of the diagrams. So we just have to have some sort of strategy to address this. So the first thing is a step-by-step graph of you need to have a step-by-step way of analyzing a graph. So the first thing you're going to do is identify the variables and the units. So start by checking the labels on both the axes to figure out what is being compared. And if you're looking at time versus speed, if you're looking at temperature versus enzyme activity, it makes you understand the units used, and this is essential. So if they do give you a graph, which is, some sort of like scatter plot, or some sort of non-linear graph, it's important to check what the axes are showing us. So maybe this is time, maybe this is amount in dollars. So having a look at the axes helps to contextualize the graph. Next, you want to recognize the type of scale that they're using. So determine whether the scale uses a linear scale, so equal spacing, or a logarithmic one, where each step represents a multiplication by, usually 10. So like a linear scale is probably what you're already used to. You just see the same increments on the same kind of area. So maybe this is like all equal increments, so like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. But there can be increments where they get a little bit more extreme, like with a logarithmic graph. They can be a little bit tricky to interpret. So log scales are common in exams like the GAMSAT and can be tricky, and each step might represent a 10 times change, so precise reading might require estimating or using a straight edge. So in some of the cases, you just have to estimate because reading it clearly might be difficult. Next, you want to observe the overall pattern. Look at the shape and the direction of the graph. Does it rise steadily, or does it fall or show fluctuations? Take note of any peaks, any high points, any troughs, any low points, or where different lines intersect, and also consider the steepness of any lines. So the steeper a slope, which normally means like a quicker change. So if we look at this compound interest graph, this slope here is much steeper than this slope here, which means that the amount of money here is changing faster than the amount of money here. And then try and assess the relationship between variables. So ask yourself, how does one variable respond to when the other one changes? So for example, if let's say the daytime temperature goes up, what happens to ice cream sales? That would go up. Or if speed goes up, the time taken for a journey would go down. And sometimes there might not even be a proper relationship. There might just be like, two variables that are relatively unrelated. So maybe somebody's weight in kilograms and the number of pets that they have. So like, does one go up as the other increases? Is it positively correlated? Does one drop as the other rises? Is there a negative correlation? Or maybe there's no relationship at all, like I've showed you in the last example there. And watch for specific thresholds or turning points where the behavior of the graph shifts. And 5, you want to apply your insights to answer questions. So you want to use everything you've observed to tackle specific questions, to find the rate of change, looking at the slope, to describe a relationship, refer to the trends and correlations, to look at exact values, estimate using the scale, or line up a ruler if needed, or just like line up your finger or your pencil, because I don't think you're able to use a ruler for the GAMSAT. So diagrams are relatively rare, but can come in a range of types, as I mentioned, and each type requires specific strategies. So those are the different strategies that you can implement for addressing those diagrams. So let's actually take a look at some of these questions. So this is a typical question that they can give us. So share of US households. Let's have a look at this. So Amazon Prime members, 82%. Decorate Christmas tree, 77. Own a pet, 68. And you can see that as we go through, 50K plus in household income. Voted in 2018 election. The percentages are seeming to go down and down and down. So the member of a church or synagogue are about 50%. Own a landline, 47%. Own a gun, 43%. All right. So we can still apply some of the knowledge that we have from the cartoons to this and the strategies. So the issue here that they're probably trying to talk about is, Amazon Prime memberships. I don't think there's any humor here, so I'm just going to skip to the point. So the point is maybe to show us how absurdly high, actually, how high it is. I shouldn't be bringing in a bias. So how high. How high the percentage of people or percentage of US households that have an Amazon membership is. Point, how high. US households. With a Prime membership is. And I guess they're trying to compare it to these things just to show that, well, maybe it's concerning that there's a really high percentage of Amazon Prime members, perhaps, or maybe that's me being biased. So maybe that's not the best thing to kind of draw from this. So the central idea that's most clearly communicated by the diagram. So A, it captures the changing makeup and lifestyle patterns of American households. Maybe, I'll come back to that one. Question B, or option B. It explores the growing influence of technology in shaping daily routines across Australia, across the US. Influence of technology. It's talking about Amazon, but daily routines, no mention of that. I'll get rid of this. There are some other things here, like pets and income and voting, but those aren't daily routines. Those kinds of things, especially voting, is like, once a year or maybe once or twice a year. For C, it draws attention to Amazon Prime's significant role in American consumer behavior. This is probably going to be the right answer just because it addresses the fact that Amazon Prime is talked about here, and it appears to look at consumer behavior because you consume things by buying a gun. That's consumers buying a gun. A consumer's purchasing and using a landline. A consumer is owning a pet. So it's most likely going to be C, but I'm just going to check the other options. So D, it questions and critiques common stereotypes about cultural values in the United States. I feel like between C and D, it's a bit tricky because we don't want to bring in biases. So questions and critiques common stereotypes about cultural values in the United States. So draws attention to Amazon Prime's significant role in American consumer behavior. Questions and critiques common stereotypes about cultural values in the United States. Okay, I'll come back to D. I just want to make sure I eliminate A. It captures the changing makeup and lifestyle patterns of American households. I don't think there's enough information to show a change. If they showed a before and after, maybe I can talk about changing lifestyle patterns or some sort of change, but I'll eliminate A. So I'm down to C and D, and they are a little bit tricky to pick between. So I just want to logically go through each part and try and break down the 50-50. So it could be either of these. And if I pick either one, I'll still get at least partial marks according to item response theory. So we'll look at this. So it draws attention to Amazon Prime's significant role in American consumer behavior. So it does tick off the part that's addressing Amazon Prime because that's the main thing that's highlighted here. Significant role in American consumer behavior. Okay, so consumer behavior is also talked about with the things that I mentioned before. But for D, it questions and critiques common stereotypes about cultural values in the United States. Now, common stereotypes, I see that with like the gun ownership and with voting, but like that's me bringing in bias. Like I feel like that's just me bringing in bias to kind of like be like, okay, well, people think that Americans own guns, but that is just a bias. And questions and critiques, like I'm not sure if just me having a picture of this next to or me having this column graph here next to these other column graphs for all these other things is really questioning and critiquing it. If they have some sort of commentary to here, or maybe they've added some sort of caption where they talk about something where they're questioning and critiquing more specifically, maybe I'd pick D. But it's just, I feel like D does not address enough of the fact that they are highlighting Amazon Prime members, and that the central idea is probably, drawing attention to Amazon Prime and it's like this role in like, how many people own an Amazon Prime membership. And I think D doesn't quite address that. So I think that it would be safe for me to eliminate D, but C and D are very close. And if D did mention something about Amazon Prime, I would pick it. But because it doesn't, I wouldn't pick D, at least not here. Okay, so the next type of question they can give us is something like this. So they give us a little puzzle that we have to solve. So place your pencil on the word start and get ready to listen to a Morse code sequence. Each time you hear a short beep called a dit, move your pencil diagonally down and right. Each time you hear a long beep or da, move down and left instead. So here's how it works. So dit means you go down to the right, and here you move down and to the left. If the sound sequence is da dit dit, so da dit dit, da dit dit, you go down to T, then around to N, down to D. Okay, you'd write D as your answer and reset your pencil back to the start. Okay, so that's Morse code, and we would use that to answer some questions. So which Morse code sequence matches with the word sun? So we're looking at S, we're looking at U, and we're looking at N. Okay, so to get to S, we should do dit, because that's bottom right. Dit again, dit again, So did, that gets us S. Did, that. Oh, sorry, did, da. So did, going that way. Did, da. Gets us U. And da. Did would give us N. Okay, so did. There's only one that's did. Then did, da. And da did. So this must be sun. And so a different question type. We're basically just gonna start from start. And what letter would you land on if you got this Morse code? So da dit. So da dit. That's just N. There's many diagram questions they can ask you in the GAMSAT, and it's not just limited to these diagrams. Like I mentioned before, you might end up getting, a Venn diagram. You might end up getting a flow chart. You might end up getting some sort of cyclical chart. But try and identify variables. Try and recognize data types. Try and follow these different strategies to help you break it down, at least in some way, and understand the diagram. But yeah, so that's how you go through. That's how you approach and break down visual text, so both cartoons and diagrams. If you want to know how to break down the questions for section 2 and how to develop ideas and create essays that score in the top 1% of the GAMSAT, then I recommend you download my free notes on section 2. It's just in the first link in the description. If you want a more comprehensive guide on how to do well in the GAMSAT, including all my strategies for section 1, all my strategies for section 2, section 3, plus bonus content, then it's just the second link in the description. And this is a more comprehensive guide. And if you just want to support the channel, you can support it through Coffee, and I'll put that in the third link in the description. And if there's anything you want me to go over, any sort of questions or book videos you want me to make regarding the GAMSAT, just let me know, and I'll make them for you, both the GAMSAT and the Casper. But yeah, aside from that, if you've enjoyed this video, then please leave a thumbs up. And if you made it to the end, maybe comment a thumbs up emoji in the comments. I'm very curious to know how many people actually watched it right to the end. And, with everyone's attention spans these days, I'm not sure how many people would have made it this far. But if you have, thank you so much for watching all of this. And I hope this has helped you in some way. I'll be posting some more videos on the GAMSAT soon.